Okay, so first, just some news. We created this Discord. I don't know if you're all aware of this already. And we started creating some channels here. So we have some categories, so the general cryptoeconomics, then project elements and applications. And some of you already started to post. Yeah, I would really like to just motivate you to post whatever you feel is of interest. And also feel free to add new channels or even categories. I think you are able to. And maybe we can start then also they are discussing different topics in a non-verbal way. And regarding news, I had no time to read it all through, but I don't know if you were aware that there was kind of a discussion. I don't know if I can call it discussion, but EOS versus Ethereum regarding governed blockchains. Vitalik published a paper around this topic, and he actually mentioned that the alternative to governed blockchains is cryptoeconomics. And then David or Dan from EOS replied also with another article. I by myself, I haven't read them into detail both, but I think it's a quite interesting discussion. Maybe we could even do a hangout on this topic in the next sessions. Okay, so the idea for today is I will present the article we put in the Telegram group, which is called Behavioral Cryptoeconomics, the Challenge and Promise of Blockchain Incentive Design. I do like a summary of this article, and this summary I just repeat what is in the article. I don't say my opinion. And if you have questions while I'm doing this, then interrupt me, but more content questions. And the discussion, so when we actually talk about our own opinions, will be then afterwards. So I try to keep it short, like 15 minutes, maximum 20 minutes, and then we can discuss this article. If you can't hear me, please let me know via Telegram. I have these open so that I'm aware that I'm lost or you are lost. Okay, so well, the general question of this article is, or actually the goal is to make us aware of the problem that at the moment cryptoeconomical models do not really take into account behavioral economics, or that that there is actually so far no real discussion around these two, let's say, topics, even though the cryptoeconomic model is like the basement now for the new crypto projects, and we are already agreeing on that cryptography is included, that game theory might be included, that we will create something like mechanism design. And now with this article, there starts this discussion around how do we actually handle the problem of situations when humans are not rational, which is all summarized by this topic of behavioral economics. And this article was written by Ilad Verbin. He's a Berlin-based computer scientist, and he works for this Berlin Innovation Ventures. And he put his view in this article. And he started off by first explaining that actually something I assume we already are aware of, that Bitcoin introduced a whole new cryptoeconomic incentive design to, in this case, to create a digital currency. And this was like opening up a little bit the Pandora box, or the box of Pandora. And but then after we had like new projects which actually took this further, no? Like he was referring to predictions with Gnosis and Augur, social media, where we have especially the topic of reputation, then governance and self-organization projects like Colony, or democracy, Earth, and even in the data collaboration space like Ocean and Numerai. So the problem is that Bitcoin is quite, I don't like the word simple, but it's just related to one application. And the problem he sees when we just, let's say, go further now to next application is that it becomes really complex. And when it becomes that complex, it might be a problem that we all implicitly assume that our decisions are always rational. So in Bitcoin, we have everything quite, let's say, designed to just one single goal, which is to achieve consensus. And when we have like predictions or we have reputation systems, everything gets far more complex. And therefore, we can't assume that humans will always behave rational. And maybe this is when we should start thinking about this whole new science, which is already there for years, which is behavioral economics. So this is a little bit the introduction of the paper. And he also defines a little bit what is behavioral economics, so that it's actually not looking on the rationality of the decision making, but actually how people behave, because through their behavior you find out the reason. So it's a little bit the other way around, that we don't think people will do certain things because it makes sense. So there is a reason, and then we apply based on the reason that this behavior will happen. It's actually the other way around. So we see a certain behavior, and then we try to find a reason why people behave this way. And after this introduction, he kind of repeated the same argument, just a little bit more into detail. So he started again with explaining Bitcoin, and made a lot of links to the white paper, to books, where the whole incentive structure, but I assume you all are aware of the incentive structure in Bitcoin, how it is actually working. And that is quite genius, because it's creating a system which is actually really different to our current system. So in our current system, we work a lot with penalties. So if people do something wrong, they have to pay something, or they might go into the castle or whatever. And in this Bitcoin incentive design, we know that it actually works the other way around. So to motivate people. So if you do something wrong, so if you're on the wrong change, for example, you don't get a real penalty, but you're just out of the game. So you are not able to reward anymore. And the combination how in Bitcoin this is achieved, this goal of that everything will try to achieve consensus through its individual participation, is actually based on two main factors. One is transparency. Everyone knows what's going on. So everyone has also the possibility to see bad behavior, which makes this community, so the community is something like the judge. So we know that everything is transparent, and any more.
Yep, Sandra, you still here? We kind of lost you. Hello? Sandra, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I put a post on Telegram. Hopefully she's monitoring it.
Okay.
This a little bit more into detail, and also why it's not from a game theory perspective. Yes?
Just to interrupt, we couldn't hear you for the past couple of minutes. So,
oh, no.
yeah.
I hate my internet.
We kind of lost you at the incentive design for Bitcoin, right? It was simple.
Okay, so where did you lose me?
From community point.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so not so far ago. So did you hear the what I was saying about transparency and participation?
No.
No, not much
Say
anyway.
this again. So then I'm really sorry for this. I'm in another place, or actually talk to the company to get it. So my internet is not working. Okay, I have now on my phone. So if then text me again. Okay, what I was saying is that in this longer introduction, he is now going a little bit more into what is actually so different in Bitcoin. So why this introduced a whole new economic model, and the two main aspects for this is transparency and participation. Because different to the current system, where everything is far more based on penalties, like you do something wrong and you get a penalty for this, in Bitcoin you have more like a rewarding incentive system. So obviously you can try to mine on a chain the longest penalty for this, but any rewarding. So it doesn't make sense from a rational behavior to do so. And the power in new incentive structures is in one, which is transparency. So in any moment, everyone can see what is happening. And therefore you have, like, if you want to express it that way, you have like constantly the whole community watching you. And if you do something wrong, if you try to attack, for example, the system, the community could just react. So this is the transparency, which makes you behave in a good way because you know it's seen by everyone. And on the other hand, you have this participation layer. So you are actually not working for Bitcoin, which we normally say, right? When we work in companies, we work for companies. But in Bitcoin, you're actually part of Bitcoin. In the moment when you start mining, you get paid by Bitcoin. So you're inside of the system. Therefore, you have an incentive to make it work. Because in the moment you are part of it, you want, because otherwise you would destroy your own incentive. So that's like the whole new paradigma, as he also as he also mentioned it, which does create models in a whole different world. And then we know that after this, new projects have started, and there he goes a little bit more into detail and explains that Gnosis, which are actually looking at predicting the future, have used like price discovery mechanisms, and Steeman as a example for social media uses these upvote and payment for good content. So you have incentive to get a good reputation, and then you have Numerai, where you actually paid for your algorithms, and some other projects. So there he's explaining that now we are actually going further. But the problem, well, actually no, before this, he's also mentioning so that the main, the killer app or the killer feature is always the incentive design. So what is so new about Bitcoin is not the blockchain, it's actually the incentive structure. And he makes then a reference to another blog post by Trent McConaughey. I'm not so sure how he pronounced it. And he is saying that let's say the biggest difference is what I've also already said with the participation aspect, is like this skin in the game. So you actually are part of it. So you have skin in the game, and therefore you react in a totally different way, as if you are an external employee who gets just who just got a job, let's say. And after this, he's introducing like a graphic, a diagram, where he has two axes. On the x-axis, you see the automatability of the project, and on the y-axis, you see the size of action space. And then he puts into the space some some crypto projects like Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example, they have really high automatability, means that there's not a lot of human interaction. So someone can mine without actually interacting in a human way. It's all done by the algorithm. And then you have like projects like Steemit, let's say, where you actually produce blog posts. So obviously you have to write them. So they are far less automatic. And on the other side, regarding the size of action space, what he was referring to is how many different possibilities to interact with the application you have. Like in Bitcoin, you only can do mining, and it's all clear what you should do. So the size of action space is really small. Whereas, again, like social media, you can create posts, you can vote, you can you can publish links, you can interact in really different ways. Or even when we also look at the DAI stablecoin project, you can be a user, or you can be a maker. So you have different ways of acting within the project. So this is the graph where he puts the different projects. And what he's later on referring to this graphic is that he actually says the higher the action space, the more, let's say, the more it depends on the human what I'm going to do, and the more choice of decision or the more options of choice someone has, the less rational can become the behavior. Because we also know this paradox of choice, like when people have, you know, this in supermarkets, for example, if there are more than 30 products, people tend to go away because the choice is too difficult. So they just leave. And it could happen the same here, that if we have like people can interact in really different ways, it might become, it's quite difficult to predict the behavior, and people can have different opinions and be not rational anymore in so many different moments of the interaction, during the interaction. So therefore, the argument is, if we have crypto projects where the action space is really big, really there's a lot of different types of interaction, we need far more focusing on behavioral economics. And on the other axis, where we have like how automatic a project is, so the less automatic, obviously, the more, again, the more human interaction is there, and the more we need to check on behavioral economics. And then he gives actually an example also for what is exactly a not rational behavior with the ultimatum game. And the ultimatum game is just that a person can get $100, but the condition is you have to give from this $100, you have to give a part to another person. You can decide how much you will give to the other person. But if the other person will reject what you are giving to the other person, none of you will get anything. But if the other person is accepting what you want to give to the other person from your $100, the other person will get what you offered, and you will get the rest. And the interesting part of this game is that normally, and if people were rational, the person should always accept. It doesn't matter how much it gets offered, it should always accept it, because even if it's less than a cent, or a cent, let's say,
Is it just me, or is she gone again?
No, she's gone again.
No, I've written to her.
Okay.
I just put it on Telegram.
Yes, thank you, Nikhil.
Oh. Losing me. Okay,
Okay, now you're back.
I'm back. What did you not hear? Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
I think we were talking about that last paragraph.
The ultimatum game?
Yeah,
Yes, just after that.
Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Okay, then you didn't lose so much.
No. Well, it's just
Cool.
20 seconds or so.
Cool, great. Now I have the mobile. At least I got it quickly. Okay, so yeah, and then in the end, so the summary of all this is, as I said, one is related to the diagram, so that we have this, let's say, this resume. The more action space, the more we should check on behavioral economics, and the less automatic the incentive structure is, the more we need to check on behavioral economics. And in the end, he
lost her again.
And now she's gone. Great.
iterations.
There comes back.
Sandra, you drop
Yes.
out and then came back. Can you start over again, please?
Yes. So I said that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I said that normally in every field, we would just try certain things. And while trying, we would see what is working and what is not working and do iterations. But the problem in the blockchain space is, what we all know is that if we want to make changes to protocols, this normally would include forks. And forks will lead to debates. And debates can become really political. And so everything can be really slow or even could end. So what we have in centralized systems, where when we do experiments, we just be really efficient because we see something is not going, we decide to do something else and we go on. But if we do this in a decentralized way and every decision we do will require consensus, experiments can be really slow and development can be really slow. So this is one problem he sees. And the other problem is that also in networks, most of the problems might actually only come to the surface once we've reached like a big amount of users. So, and in this moment, so if a network became so big, then maybe we are already in this, let's say, too big to fail. So if we now change again something, the whole network will collapse. So this actually, I think his problems he's mentioning is referring a lot to that we are in decentralized networks. And in decentralized networks, we just can't test so easily. And we need actually a certain amount of users, of connections to test. So this makes it all a little bit problematic in terms of testing different theories. And then I think in the last paragraph, he's calling for this consciousness of if we now create crypto projects, we should really look at what is already in the current economic system applied of mechanism designs and incentive structures, and try to be really careful by applying it and not much more. I mean, I think he can't also not say so much more because there is nothing at the moment. But I think that's also the reason why we set up these calls and so on. So I think the best is really to at least speak about what has worked and what not, and look at the projects that are already there, because from them we can learn the most. Okay, that was actually now my opinion. So that's the summary of the article. If you read it and you want to add something, please go ahead. Did you read the article before?
Yeah, I had actually gone through it. Anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have also gone through it, but not in detail. In the last part, not in detail.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add? No?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Yes.
Rupesh,
So then we start
Yeah.
the discussion now.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was just referring to the content, but now we can go and yeah, tell me your
I have
opinion.
gone through that. I've gone through the research, and I have
Yes.
pointers. So, firstly, is like let's say it's like I've been looking at this for quite some time, especially after Steemit came out with their platform and other utility tokens that came out. Sorry to introduce myself. I'm Harsh. And I've been in the crypto space, Nikhil, and I've been connected with them. I've been looking at crypto economics part in quite depth in recent times, and my concern is my concern is in respect to the fluctuations of the crypto. What happens is a utility token is in the system by, let's say, in an open system where the utility token represents some value, but when the fluctuations happen, let's say the price of Bitcoin went up and went down, it affects the price of all the tokens. How can we shield from such fluctuations? So that is one of my behavioral construct, which is like it's how can we curtail that variable element? So that's one major question I had for crypto economics.
Actually, he is mentioning this too. I forgot to say it, but exactly your concern. He's saying too that in the moment when
I think I joined.
sorry,
I think I joined late then. I joined just right now. That's why that was the
no, that's it's an amazing topic. It's so true. Like it's something like macro cryptoeconomics, or not even. It's like, as you say, like how the systems are not in their own world. No, there is speculation going on, which is not related to the cryptoeconomic model, but it affects the price, and the price is created by the cryptoeconomic model, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, the thing that on this point I'd like to contribute one dimension also. So what some of the models which I tried was to use stable coins or make a pseudo stable coin in order to curtail the effects. It's like let's say DAI. Let's peg the utility token on DAI, but that also has a negative connotation because on one hand we are using the token. Let's say one hand the token tends to be associated with on the market value, and on the other hand it is stable also. So that's a conflict area. So this is like from the system dynamics simulation model I came across this stuck point.
hello, Harsh. I'm sorry. I think we just lost you. You can hear us.
So what I was saying was, let's say I tried to make one utility token over a system dynamic OPM model, wherein I was fluctuating the price of the token based on a stable coin on the open market. If the price rises, it creates a lot of mess for the stable coin. So that was also one of the concern. So it creates a stress of coin. So the fluctuations will create stress on liquidity on the stable coin. So that's where I got stuck.
Right. No. I actually have a comment on that. So I've been seeing this. It's the common thing, right? You have your stable coins usually are tied to some sort of index or some sort of basket of currencies or some kind of external lever, and then basically you move the value of the coin based on things like that. Fluctuations there. See, the thing I always come back to is, see, there needs to be a feedback mechanism. There needs to be a closed feedback mechanism. So to kind of step back a little, basically, I'm not sure if you guys think so, but I have a background in electrical engineering, and some of the things that I was taught in class basically are about noise cancellation and feedback control systems based on feedback, right? So there's this idea of basically taking a little bit of the fluctuation or the noise that comes in a signal, and then trying to feed that back in the opposite manner to try to kind of attenuate that particular noise, and then pull out a signal from there. The challenge with this happens basically if you're not exactly opposite or harmonically opposite to the particular signal, you end up actually making things worse, right? So the trick in these kind of things essentially is that, or rather the challenge basically is that there are two things over there. When you try to tie a particular system to an external system, right? And there's no feedback, or there's no very strong, clear loop as to how that feedback comes. There's a small chance, or there's a non-zero chance that you actually might make things worse, right? And if you make things worse, it basically becomes you're adding more noise, and it's fluctuate. It'll become even more wilder fluctuations, right? So when you're talking about things like tying what is essentially a closed system like a blockchain to an external mechanism like dollars and cents and or currency, you always have this particular risk in the sense that that's an open system, and you don't have a very clear way where the dollar or cent is basically affected by anything that happens in the Bitcoin space. It's a one-way mechanism, right? So what essentially happens then is that you get driven by whatever vagaries of the particular surrounding network is, right, or the surrounding system is. So I don't have an answer to that right now, except maybe taking the whole world and then making it all the currencies in the world, or just replace everything with blockchain or Bitcoin or some one currency, and then kind of make that the system along which it works. Kind of like how the Earth is driven by its own closed feedback loop, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, and things like that. But see, then also you don't. That's a very large kind of a mechanism that's going to take a while, right? After all, it took 4 billion years for the Earth to move from being a pile of dust into what we have right now, right? And it may not take 4 billion years, but at least I don't see this happening very quickly, unless there is. I mean, frankly, I don't see this happening very quickly. It has to be a series of incremental steps that actually kind of tips things over to one side, and suddenly that particular feedback happens in the right way, and then it becomes a virtuous cycle. And so far, in most of the mechanisms that I have seen, the trick or the thing is that particular portion, the initial portion where you get that initial virtuous cycle, is where most things fail, right? So I don't know whether it's going to be where we get it right. Go ahead.
I just elaborate where I got stuck. So the thing is, it's like the kind of model that I made was, let's say you have a private, or let's say a closed loop. There are two coins.
I'm sorry, lost you again.
Situation. is wobbling around, that the other coin is roaming, and the
We're losing you hard.
just
We
so
can't
it's like
really
when the price is
we don't understand your point because we are losing you
yeah.
each and every 5 seconds. So
You talked about creating a closed system with 2 coins. Is that am I right? Harsh?
Just a second.
in the meantime, what I'd like to do maybe is to take your point, Nikhil, which I think is really interesting, and what Harj is going to explain a little bit later, because he apparently tried to solve one particular issue with a token design. But to put this a little bit more into a wider context and understand how is behavioral economics actually within this discussion, right? Because behavioral economics is all about decision making, and decision making is everywhere in the blockchain space. It is essentially how we decide to move or not the coins that we possess, right? And so basically, when we enter into some sort of game, whether that's a project or a particular situation, we have to take decisions, and those decisions that we can take, whatever they are, right, will define what the outcome of all this is going to be. But apart from the decision that we sometimes can, visualize or specifically identify, you've got other ingredients that enters the scene, right? One of them is the private information that we all have at hand. This is all the things that we know, and this obviously is going to interfere or modify the way we apprehend the situation and therefore the decision that we are going to take. But it's not only private information. What we also can add as an ingredient are the transfers function, as they call it in mechanism design theory, which is basically the token that you can receive if you behave in a certain way, or the tokens that you won't get if you decide to behave another way. And with all that, and also like interactions with other users and so on, you elaborate a decision rule, right? And the decision rule will give you, under a certain set of assumptions, including the information, private information, and the tokens that you might or might not receive, then you will elaborate a decision rule that will lead you to take some specific decision. But these decision rules are not discrete, right? It's not right or wrong or yes or no. It's most of the time a probability distribution. And so you don't always get the same answer with under the exact same assumption, because of that variability that is intrinsic to real life. And so, long story short, what I'd like to say is that basically what is presented or highlighted by Daniel Kahneman and Atmos Tversky, who were the first two individuals, and Daniel Kahneman received a Nobel Prize for that. They scientifically demonstrated that under some assumptions, human beings behave always the same way. There is some kind of way to trick the individual that we always lead to the same outcome. And so I think that in our token design or our crypto projects in general, the idea here is really to understand all those psychological biases that behavioral economics is giving us, to understand how they are going to modify the decision rule of the players of each of the game that we want players to play, right? And with this understanding, then we might be able to refine the mechanisms that will make the project work properly, or the way we intend it to work, and not be surprised by irrational behavior, which is not really irrational. It's just that we didn't expect that kind of behavior. but it's as you know, it's within the boundaries of human behavior anyway. So this is, I think, the direction that the author of the article is trying to explain, and I think this is how we should understand this.
So
Okay, go.
yeah, so one of the main point that is missing is, you know, anyone who is doing the, you know, behavioral economics and this, they need to identify what are the right behaviors and what are the wrong behavior for them. So this point has not been mentioned anywhere in the article. People expect that this is right and this is rational or this is irrational. As in, you know, when you are designing the system, what thing you would be requiring in a right way, they are not articulated, and people are just picking some stuff from there. This is not how the system will work on. System will work on according to their design. Not Augur or anyone, any system is working on something different, but whereas BTC is based on consensus mechanism. So these are two separate things that need to be defined into any protocol. So this was my point. So I got from it. This was missing from the article.
No, that's a good point. My comment on that essentially is that when it is the expectation is that every system would be different, right? So the incentives or the good behaviors or bad behaviors that you want to identify for a system like Steemit would be quite different from something like blockchain, like BTC, right? Like Bitcoin, because they are fundamentally addressing different things, right? They're one is a social network, and the other one is a I don't know exactly. It's a currency with some extra features in it, right? And so fundamentally, basically, see, one thing I like, or one thing, whenever I hear people talking about Bitcoin and blockchain, right? One of the things that a lot of people try to do, which I found very counterintuitive, or not counterintuitive, not very useful, is that they try to look at the core blockchain data structure as a technology that happens to solve. I mean, that can be abstracted out in some way and applied elsewhere without any modification, right? Whereas without realizing that that's not the actual genius of Bitcoin, right? That's not the thing that works. It's basically the whole mechanism together, right? It is the blockchain and the consensus and the Byzantine general and the incentive mechanism for work, all of that, right? So they've kind of created a system which has the economic as well as the computer science basically married together in a very tightly coupled manner. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically pull that apart and then try to see if that one piece of it works, magically works everywhere. And that's where we start seeing the challenges and the limitations of stuff, right? So when people say that the cryptoeconomics for Bitcoin is good, and we should apply cryptoeconomics in other blockchains. What I think is important is to understand that the economic structure or the economic incentives or the economic philosophy of Bitcoin itself, right, is very aligned to and very specific to the use case that Bitcoin as a system addresses, right, and is not necessarily useful or even relevant in other places.
And also, there are no judgment of value. I mean, to come back to the question from it was Rupesh, right? Of what's missing from the article. I would disagree maybe with you, because I don't think you can appreciate I don't think you should include a judgment of value of whether a behavior is bad or good in advance, but more realize the extent to which a behavior can lead to some outcomes that are desired or not desired in your specific project.
Lauren, my point of view was taking that first, the same what Nikhil said is, you know, we can't just apply any kind of system applicable to any other system. It's just first we need to understand what are the incentive mechanism we are going to prepare for any we are going to design, and then what are the ideal amount of ideal, or what we say that what all the behaviors we expect from the people and how they would be interacting with each other, and then figuring out that, you know, this kind of behavior we need require and this kind of behavior is rational or irrational. So this point of
no, and basically, Rupesh, I think you hit the nail. One particular comment I had on what you are saying is that in my personal experience, or in my opinion, essentially, it's very hard to do that upfront. Okay, because when you're designing a system that's complicated, right? That's basically a network of things that has human beings behaving in it. Even with behavioral economics theory, it's very hard to predict upfront how things would be, right? Because people are very different in different places. Culture plays a very big part. Like Laurent pointed out, Kahneman talks about system 1 and system 2 and primal instincts and things like that. But a lot of it also is different for different types of people. And some of the sensibilities that maybe, I don't know, that you'd find amongst people in India would be very different from the sensibilities that you would find amongst Europeans, right? It's a cultural thing, right? So one of the challenges I see to that particular statement is that a priori trying to define upfront how that particular incentive structure would be designed, and predicting whether that with any degree of certainty whether that would actually work out the way you intended it.
That's interesting, because I don't know if you remember from a big Telegram chat we had some months ago, I think. Vitalik Buterin is actually suggesting that the minimum common denominator within a community is the appreciation of money itself, right? The only thing that everybody is going to value the same is money. So if by choosing a specific behavior you find a way to increase your wealth, it's always going to be a preferred behavior, or a behavior that's going to be above anything else. I don't know if that's true in every situation, but that's something that might be interesting to take into account, whether to evaluate how far we can go with cultural differences and so on.
So I would actually disagree with Vitalik in that particular sense, because there are situations where money is not the point. Classic case would be altruistic behavior, right? Why do you have altruistic behavior? You don't get any financial reward for being altruistic, right? But at the same time, we know that people are altruistic all the time. I was reading an article just today about one Danish lady who basically adopted a child in Nigeria, and who was starving, and because he was ostracized as a witch, and now that child has grown up, and he's attending school or whatever in Denmark. So I mean, there's no possible financial motive to do that, right?
That's just a different incentive. And at the moment we have that money is globally an accepted incentive, but this might, and I think really it will change definitely. And we don't know really what will be the next big incentive. Maybe it will be reputation. Maybe it will be something more like altruistic behavior, which is also, back to this, is also an incentive to do. And if it's only the incentive to do something good, or to be happy in the end, it can be an incentive as well. I also wanted to say something to what I have more and more the feeling is, at the moment in our current world, we have companies and we have a state, and both have different interests sometimes, and that's good. And they also have the goal. The company has the goal to make their company run and produce whatever they produce in the best way they can. And the state has totally different objectives. But my problem actually is more and more, if I look, for example, at Bitcoin started with a general idea, and it actually worked. So the first step was make it work, make it that mining succeeds, that we have always new blocks, that there are not bugs. But now we are discussing it produces too much energy costs. Is this actually a problem of Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin itself doesn't have this, not energy cost, energy waste. Bitcoin in itself has not a problem with energy waste. Bitcoin itself is just money. It's just a product, let's say. But our problem as a society is that it wastes so much energy. So I have a little bit the feeling, if we want to create perfect systems where we make everything is in one system fulfilled, then we will never succeed. I think that's nearly impossible to create applications which will be good for the society, but also will be able to work. And in the
Sandra, we lost you.
Well, any opinion to close that session? I think this is going to be the last intervention. But if you have any comment on what Sandra was saying.
I see that Harsh rejoined. I just want to quickly ask if Harsh wants to carry on or
in the cryptoeconomics part. So this is what I was trying to say. I just made a quick short diagram, and this is the loopy based. It's based on a small. It's based on a system dynamics model. So it'll exactly elaborate the problem. If the price of Bitcoin goes up, the market price of the token will go up and the utility of the token will go up. But when it goes down, it creates a negative spiral. And that's what would hinder that's what I see, that it can hinder the actual utility of the token. And in the behavioral part, I have one comment, and it's like at times the system needs to be really in a closed loop manner. Getting too many behavioral variables would be like trying to get an analog system into a very limited digital world. So the amount of processing required by analog systems is way higher, and the smart contracts or the current blockchain frameworks are too limited in terms of processing. So that's what is like, what I understand is the limitation.
Mm-hmm. I was not there.
No, I put that link on the Telegram group that Harsh was talking about.
Okay.
So it's basically, if I'm not mistaken, Harsh, this is an animation of
no, it's like it's basically a system dynamics model, a very small one, but the real one that I have built on OPM is a bit elaborate. It's like if the price of Bitcoin goes high, the market price of token goes high, and the utility also of the token. So there's the plus sign in the diagram indicates the level of correlation. So if the price of Bitcoin is directly correlated with the price of token, and price of token is directly correlated with the utility of the token. Hence, what happens if the price goes up, the utility goes up. So based on that, you can have various sets of models associated to it, which can prove that okay, this cannot go wrong. So where my model failed was the liquidity. If I peg in this model itself, if I put a stable coin, the stable coin goes in negative liquidity.
Would you like maybe in another session, because we are now reaching the end of this session?
Sure.
Would
I would
you
like
to introduce this module in a presentation,
sure.
and then we discuss this? That would be really interesting. I think.
Sure. Because this is an actual problem.
Yeah.
Wherein when Vitalik is saying that all the ICOs will go bust because they are most of them are trying to be utility token, but this is the reason why they'll go bust. It's like they have a correlation factor with Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin price fluctuates like 10-20% every day, the utility fluctuation at the rate of 10-20% a day is not a valid point for anyone using the system.
Yeah, that's totally true. Really interesting.
Even by using stable coins, you were suggesting before.
Yeah,
it's not
so
possible.
in case of stable coin, what happens is a stable coin, like they run out of liquidity. The price of Bitcoin is high, the Tether is able to provide liquidity, but if the price of Bitcoin falls, Tether will fail to provide liquidity.
Okay.
Well, up to a point, but we're going to discuss stable coins in another session. Shortly.
This is linked. This aspect is linked.
Definitely. Okay. I would say, to not make it longer, we try to keep this hour. But I really apologize for my problem with the connection. I will try to find another solution for the next weeks. Change the company as soon as I can. No, but I will manage. And so, yes, sorry?
Just a thought on that particular aspect of it. So I noticed on Discord, and I don't know Discord, so if anybody has used it, that would be useful to let me know. There is a voice channel on Discord. Would it be possible to do a call, like a group call like this on Discord?
Yeah, we can try the system as well.
If we can link this to a video as well, yes.
Well, we just need a way to record the session, but it might be possible on too. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be great. And I would really would be really pleased if you could also now start coming to Discord, because there we can have the conversations more related to topics. That would be good. And actually, Harsh, maybe you would like to put some links there.
Sure.
We have at the moment we have only the Maker project, but feel free to add it to add a new channel. Maybe we do one for stable coins in general.
I'd love that.
Okay, cool. Then thank you very much for joining. Next week will be Laurent about stablecoins, I think. Yeah, and then we will be also happy if you want to present something. You can just let us know, and then we set it up that way. Okay, then have a good Sunday, and thank you again for joining.
Happy Easter to everybody who's
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.